All right, let's go ahead and get started. I would like to first thank everybody for joining us today and welcome to the April edition of the Learning Exchange Series hosted by the Forest Carbon and Climate Program and the Department of Forestry at Michigan State University. My name is Dr. Chad Papa, where I direct the Forest Carbon and Climate Program here at Michigan State University. Before we kind of get into this, I would like to direct people's attention to our final upcoming webinar on May 6th. And you can see our whole schedule from this past year. And we have a library of all of our webinars that go back to 2017 on our website as well. Before we get started, I would like to thank our co-host for the 2025-2026 Forest and Climate Learning Exchange Series, Society of American Foresters. The Society of American Foresters is a national scientific and educational organization representing forestry and related natural resource professionals across the United States. Founded in 1900, SAF promotes science-based sustainable management and stewardship of the nation's public and private forests. I would also again like to highlight our upcoming May webinar where Dr. Puskarkano from Clemson University will be giving a talk, Resilient and Climate Smart Training Education for Professionals in the South. You can go ahead and use the QR code on the screen to register for that webinar. You can also find the registration link in the chat as well. Some brief housekeeping before we jump into it. At the end of this webinar, we will have a Q&A session. There are two different ways that participants can ask questions. Point to the bottom of your screen where you see the little Q&A function. Feel free to submit questions at any point to that during the webinar. And you can also use the chat function and send a message directly to us and the panelists for questions, and we will do our best to address as many as we can. I would also encourage you to sign up for the Forest Carbon and Climate Program mailing list by scanning the QR code on the screen or seeing the mailing list link in the chat to stay up to date on future and upcoming webinars and education opportunities and learn about some of the applied research and extension work that we do here at Michigan State University. So lastly, participants have the opportunity to earn continuing education credits through SAF. If you register to this webinar using the same email as your SAF account, your credits will automatically be applied to your accounts. However, if you registered with a different email for this webinar as your SAF account, please contact SAF directly at cf@safnet.org. And with that, I'm very excited to welcome Edie and Jane to be giving a talk on behalf of the U.S. Endowment of Forests and Communities titled Forestry Analytics for Carbon Tracking, the first ever comprehensive forest carbon data system. And with that, I am going to hand off the presentation to Jane and Edie. And I will let them also introduce themselves as a part of the talk.
Thanks, Chad. I'll just pause for a second. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. Special thanks to Chad and his team at MSU for inviting us to give this webinar. Hi, I'm Jane Alonso, and I am a Colorado-based consultant, and I lead the partnerships outreach and communications work for the Forestry Analytics for Carbon Tracking, or FACT platform. And I'm here with Edie Sunny Hall. Edie, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody. Great to be here. I'm Edie Sani Hall. I'm a Seattle-based consultant, and I am serving as the science lead on this project.
This is our agenda for today. First, we're going to provide an overview of the project and then describe our platform functions, including our data sources and our guiding methodology. And then we're going to bring to life several ways that users will be able to use the platform. And then finally end with a timeline for the completion of the project and the launch of the platform. Project overview. So Edie and I are part of a broader project team that is on contract with the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities. For those of you who aren't familiar with the endowment, it is a nonprofit public foundation established in 2006 out of the Softwood Lumber Agreement. The endowment serves as a catalyst for systemic change in forest communities. And this platform was born out of work the endowment has funded since 2021 to fill gaps in carbon data transparency across the supply chain. So who's asking for this forest carbon data? Well, the marketplace is driving the need. Companies are trying to decarbonize, and as they're doing that, they're trying to show greenhouse gas reductions through target setting, and they need data to tell that story to help set their targets and show how they're reaching them. And globally, other countries are still tied to the Paris commitments, even if the US isn't. And those countries are increasingly asking for carbon data as part of their sourcing requirements. So we are still hearing a lot of interest and demand across the supply chain for this data. And there's a real need for this in terms of meeting the market demand. So this is our project mission statement. The platform will provide transparent, standardized, and accessible carbon data all in one place, designed to meet the needs of those who grow, produce, and use products made from American forests. This last sentence or last part of the sentence is really critical. The platform is designed to meet the needs of users. We aren't meeting our mission if the platform sits stagnant on a website and isn't useful to the people who need this data to tell their stories. And we're going to go through user case studies in more detail later in the presentation. So let's break the mission statement down here. What does this look like in more detail? Well, first of all, the platform aims to be comprehensive, providing a single source for forest sector carbon data. So it's probably going to be no surprise to attendees to this webinar that the forest sector is highly, highly fragmented. Credible carbon data exists, but it's often very, very hard to find. And it often doesn't come packaged in formats that are user-friendly. We're aiming to make this a single source where everyone can go for that comprehensive data. The platform is also going to standardize data. The carbon data that does exist, it often comes packaged in different formats. Maybe the calculations underlying that data are executed using different parameters or different numerical amounts. The platform aims to standardize all of this across a consistent basis for data comparisons. Third, the platform will bring together the most up-to-date relevant data. Where we find the data needs updating, and there are places the data does need updating, the platform project is committed to identifying those needs and incentivizing those updates. But we aim to be the place where if anyone wants to find out what the most relevant data is, they know they can find that on this platform. And finally, the platform will be accessible. And not just accessible, but, and this is a big drum roll here, it's going to be free in a world where everyone is getting nickeled and dimed for every service and piece of information out there. We are providing a free service. The public will be able to access this platform and use its tools without paying subscription fees. A user doesn't even need to log in to use the platform. They can log in to save their data. We're going to talk a little bit about that later, but they don't have to. They can just go to this website, browse it, and use it to get data. So bottom line here, it's tax season, and most of you are probably not doing your taxes by hand. You could do it that way, right? You could do your calculations on a pad of paper with a pencil and then look up your tax rate in the IRS tax table. But I'm banking here that you probably don't do that. You or your accountant probably use some type of digital software to crunch your numbers. And that's what we're aiming to do here. We want to be the TurboTax, basically, for forest carbon data. One great example of that is the amount of carbon stored in a harvested wood product can currently be found in a U.S. Forest Service table. So you can do your calculations and look up that amount in a table. What we're going to be doing here is digitizing that, so it doesn't need to be done by hand. This platform is being built on a public-private partnership between the U.S. Forest Service and a number of forest sector partners. These partners signed a memorandum of agreement in February of 2024, and that agreement has continued across administrations. So noteworthy, the current administration does support this project. And worth noting, basically, that there are a lot of trade associations here, you'll notice, representing different parts of the supply chain. Those associations are bringing data to the table, and it's really important because forest sector carbon data exists in both the public sphere and the private sphere. So by having these trade associations be part of this agreement, they are bringing that critical private sector data to the table. The MOA does outline funding resources, staffing, contributions of data, and technical assistance. So it's very, very complicated. We won't go into a ton of detail around it here, but everybody who has signed this MOA is bringing a piece of it to the table. And as noted earlier in the presentation, the U.S. Endowment for Forestry Communities is the anchor project partner, and they are the ones administering the project. We have a very large project team that we're bringing together, and it really convenes the expertise of USDA, the expertise of methodology advisors. We have subcontractors that are specializing in different aspects of either carbon analysis or digital platform development. And everyone is bringing a different piece of expertise or resourcing to the table to get this project, to breathe life into it and to create it. So it's a wide breadth of information and expertise. And just notably, we are open to incorporating more partners, stakeholders, and research. The MOA is not an open document for additions, but as we develop the platform, we are going to be reaching out to add partners to our bench and to utilize the best expertise that's out there to create this platform. With that, I will turn this over to Edie to talk about the platform functions.
All right, next slide. All right, well, hi, everybody. Okay, now we're going to talk about the platform data, tools, and uses. So the framework for the tool methodologies follow the forest chapter of USDA's Quantifying Greenhouse Gas Fluxes in Agriculture and Forestry Methods for Entity Scale Inventory, which is also known as the Entity Level Guidelines. These guidelines first came out in 2014 and are meant to provide a very, very simple way for farmers and ranchers and forest landowners to quantify their greenhouse gas emissions and removals from their land. The second edition was published in 2024. And in this version, the forestry chapter added the downstream emissions and benefits associated with the products that came off the land to complete that full system impact of forest management. Now, as Jane mentioned, the platform is essentially making these guidelines more essential, the TurboTax reference. A key difference, however, is that we are also taking this framework and applying it to participants across the value chain. So we are building these tools so that a manufacturer or consumer can also understand the full system impact from a unit of a product or an end use. Okay, next slide. So where does the data come from? Well, the forest and the wood product data come mainly from the Forest Service, from the FIA program, and from the published harvested wood product carbon information found in the entity level guidelines. The data on the emissions associated with manufacturing wood products come from the private sector through published LCAs, life cycle assessments, or environmental product declarations. And these come from mill survey data. Now, I think Jane mentioned this before, but it's important to underscore that this data in many different places is mostly already available to the public. So if you have a way of already getting this data, you don't have to worry that this platform is going to give you a totally different result. The key is that we're bringing this public and private information across the entire value chain together into one accessible place. The second important thing to emphasize is that this platform is about the data. It's about providing the accessible, transparent, and standardized data. This is not a decision to support tool. So these data can be used in decision support tools, either on the forestry end or on the consumer end, but they are not decision support tools in and of themselves. Okay, next slide. So the platform functions. Let's talk about the components of the platform. The goal is to provide data that tracks carbon, both biogenic and fossil, across the forest sector value chain to really understand the impact of the entire forest sector, US forest sector, on atmospheric greenhouse gas emissions. So we have 3 tools that address the biogenic carbon changes in the forest, and I will talk more about why there are 3 tools in the next slide. And then we have 3 tools that address the stored carbon and the carbon emissions from product manufacturing and end uses. Okay, next slide here. So looking at this from the land perspective, we have 2 forest tools available. One is what we like to call a calculator. This is for landowners who have their own detailed forest inventory and would like to convert their inventory to carbon. So you would think that this would be easy, a simple endeavor, but it's actually a pain in the butt for any of you who have, have done this. And there are a lot of opportunities for error, a lot of opportunity for variability in conversion factors that you choose, in deciding whether or not you're using the conversion factor for above a bark volume or below bark volume. And this just makes a lot of potential variability and potential for error in the results. In addition, most landowners may not have consistent measurements across all of their forest types and age classes. So this tool standardizes the conversions using FIA factors and also fills in the gap with FIA data. So users of this calculator, importantly, users of this calculator will not have to share their data, but we believe this will be useful for companies who are, for example, setting climate commitments and want to publicly report, or just to privately understand their carbon inventory. The second forest tool is for landowners who are interested, landowners or interested stakeholders who do not have a detailed inventory and may just know their forest type, location, size, and potentially age. So this tool uses FIA data to develop carbon yield tables to give an estimate of annual sequestration. This tool also has a basic scenario component, which was built into the last version of the entity guidelines. It runs some very simple scenario projections for a simple harvest, afforestation, avoided deforestation, and lengthening rotation. And then the third forest tool, the landscape tool, is looking at this perspective of further down the value chain. So this can be either a manufacturer or even a consumer. It allows a user to identify a landscape, which can represent the region where their wood fiber comes from, And then we'll deliver information about what is happening on that landscape with metrics such as net carbon change per unit harvest, net carbon change per acre, growth drain ratio, mortality per acre, and altogether this can help better understand the carbon dynamics in that region. Okay, next slide. So now we're going to talk about the harvested wood product tool functions. So we have 3 tools that describe the different carbon greenhouse gas impacts on the atmosphere once a log is harvested. The first tracks carbon that's stored long-term in a harvested wood product. So this tool will use Forest Service statistics and that identify how much of a harvested log of a particular type in a particular region of the US ends up in different types of products like softwood lumber or OSB or plywood, or are emitted with energy capture, used in manufacturing, or without energy capture. The Forest Service also
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's right. The Forest Service also has data that further tracks what end uses these different products end up in. So, for example, whether a softwood lumber, how much goes to a single family home versus a commercial building versus furniture, railroad ties, paper, packaging. And each one of these end uses has a specific service life, as well as a assumption of what their end use fates are. So these can all be pulled together to track how much carbon is stored long-term from the starting point of a log or the starting point of a product. The embodied carbon tool tracks the emissions associated with manufacturing a wood product, pulling together U.S. wood product environmental product declarations or published LCA reports. So these data include cradle-to-gate emissions associated with cultivation and harvesting, transportation, and then the manufacturing of the specific wood products. And then finally, the displacement factor tool pulls together published LCA information comparing a wood product end use embodied carbon to their non-wood functionally equivalent alternatives. This database builds on the work outlined in the Entity Level Guidelines and currently has over 100 comparisons across 5 different end use categories. These are displayed as something that's known as a displacement factor, which is the embodied carbon of a functionally equivalent alternative compared with the embodied carbon of a wood product divided by the carbon difference stored in those units of these products. So finally, the same product to end use and log to product allocations as are found in the harvested wood product tool, these displacement factors can be calculated back to a product and further back to a unit of harvested log. So I want to emphasize that all of this may sound very technical and very overwhelming to you all, but it does paint that full system picture. In addition to having these results on the platform, the goal is to really be able to educate the users on what these terms mean, where the data comes from, and how they are calculated. So next slide, please. Okay, so clearly there's a lot going on here. I want to summarize what this platform will do and what it won't do. So what it will do, it's going to provide consistency and transparent communication of both the data sources and the methodologies. So each tool will have a detailed user methodology that will explain all of the equations and where the data comes from. Another key point, and this is actually my favorite part about this project, is that it's designed for continuous improvement. This is not a one-off. This is going to be a living, breathing, improving platform. Already, the project has identified research gaps. There are products that are not in there. There are parameters that might be outdated, and there are desired new features that we know users are going to want and ask for. And these can all align research agendas for years to come. And this is where you all can play a role, where you can provide new data on new products or new research, new features. And then finally, Jane emphasized this before, this is free and publicly accessible. So what this slide is not. So this is not meant to be a carbon protocol for a carbon offset market. It's not a regulatory program. It's also not a greenhouse gas reporting standard, though some of the data in this platform can be helped use to compile a greenhouse gas report. This platform also does not allow a user to track a forest product back to a specific tract of land, but it can provide information at a regional level for where what's happening from where the fiber that you might have in the region where that might be. And then finally, this platform does not address non-US forests and products. This is a US specific platform. And with that, I will hand it back to Jane.
Thanks, CD. So users are at the core of how we're building the platform. We are designing the data interface such that our core groups of users can access this data in ways they find useful. We've identified 4 groups of primary users. There will be many, many different types of users, but these are our 4 sort of primary categories. Landowners, forest product manufacturers. In some cases, a company may own both land and manufacturing, so they may cross those categories. Forest products consumers, and academics and researchers. And we're going to outline 3 specific case studies today within these user groups. So first, a sustainability manager for a corporate landowner. How would they use the platform? So first, they could use the platform to calculate land carbon fluxes and harvested wood product impacts using standardized tools. Why is this important? Because doing these calculations is really complicated. Edie talked a little bit about that when she talked about the land flux tools. And companies don't often have the time or resources to devote to this activity. So we're going to make it easy for them by standardizing those calculations and making it free and accessible. Second, they can use the platform to streamline annual sustainability report updates by saving and reusing prior year data. So I mentioned earlier, you don't have to log in and save your search, but you can. And to go back to that TurboTax example, isn't it wonderful when you can just upload your previous year's tax data to your current year's and then just make changes off of that? And that's what our platform will provide in terms of capability. So that landowner could reference authoritative US Forest Service FIA data to explain regional carbon stock changes. Private companies are part of a much broader forest landscape that has a lot of different ownership types in our country. There's a lot of family and individual landowners, for example. And so they can reference that broader FIA data capturing those ownership types to explain what's happening on the landscape in their region. And then fourth, they can respond to concerns about harvest practices with credible and carbon estimates. Edie explained this, but our platform does allow our user to access land and product downstream carbon calculations from a harvest perspective, which allows for data-driven answers to these types of questions from the marketplace. So our second user case is a sustainability director at an architecture firm. How could this person use the platform? Well, first, they can use it to compare material options to show sustainability trade-offs between wood products and other materials. Our platform brings together the most recent EPD and LCA data from a variety of products for a variety of products all in one place. Second, they could verify that wood product data in external LCA tools aligns with standardized platform data. So our platform aims to improve or support relevant LCA tools that can use our platform as a data source. Edie mentioned some of that data is already there, so it's in both places, but where we can support those LCA tools and make it easier for them, especially as data becomes updated, they can go to our platform as a source for that data and then use it in their tools. Third, the sustainability director could cross-check the accuracy of a whole building LCA tool using current EPD data and methods. The carbon displacement factor that Edie described provides that substitution and comparison data for products that can be cross-checked with a whole building LCA analysis. And fourth, they could explain the forest carbon cycle with educational materials to support sourcing decisions. We will have educational material on the landing page that will connect the platform's functions and data uses across the supply chain, and that will help a user better understand the regional sourcing dynamics. And then finally, our last user case is a researcher at a public university. How can this person use the platform? So they can review synthesized carbon substitution data for forestry products. We already explained that's the carbon displacement factor tool. They can identify missing products or end uses to guide research. Again, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but we really do want this platform to be a vehicle to identify gaps in carbon data, and I incentivize solutions to fill those gaps. The researcher could link wood product research to climate mitigation. So this platform can help put an individual's research in a larger context within the forest sector supply chain. And the researcher could use the platform to adapt methodologies for international use and ongoing improvement. Our platform can serve as a model for replication in other countries and also will be receptive to any improvements that arise from work done internationally as well. And finally, our timeline. So we're currently in the pre-launch phase. We're developing the platform and its tools. Initial testing of the first two fully developed tools, and those are the embodied carbon and carbon displacement factor tools. That testing began just 10 days ago. The platform beta launches in the fall of 2026 when the platform will be broadly available to the public. However, it is a beta launch, so we'll be testing platform functions and executing bug fixes, but this is the moment when all of you will have access to the platform, and we'll be doing demos of the platform for audiences, and we're really going to be searching for feedback in terms of both the data and the functionalities. So we'll be doing all of those improvements and bug fixes, and then the platform will fully permanently go live in the summer of 2027. Its final home has yet to be determined. The endowment is a catalyst for filling gaps in the forest sector, but they don't run long-term programs. So eventually the platform will need a permanent home, and that permanent home has not yet been identified. Oh, and one more thing to mention here. Version 1 release. We do envision that there'll probably be version 2s and versions 3s of this platform. Edie mentioned we are building this to continuously improve. There will probably be adaptations in the future that will meet the new demands of the future marketplace. So we're really looking at this as a version 1. We're getting all the data and the functionalities going, and then we can improve upon it later. And this is our final slide. If you would like to sign up for updates, the QR code will take you to the U.S. Endowment's project landing page. You can sign up to be part of our list, and we look forward to keeping in touch and providing information on the platform as we head towards beta launch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane and Edie. That was very informative. And we have some questions now that have come through during the presentation. So I'm going to, I guess, just jump into a methods question here. So for some people on the call, you might know that the Forest Inventory Analysis program or the FIA database relies on physical plot-based measurements. How does the tool incorporate maybe other types of information, or how do you go about estimating like carbon accounting or carbon measurements at larger spatial scales from those plots?
Yeah, so great question. So two things from this. So the FIA plots, are meant to give a statistical, accurate assessment at larger scales, the state level, and in some cases smaller than that, depending on the number of plots that you're parsing out. So we are very cognizant of that when we're looking at bringing the data together, that there's a sort of minimum number of plots that can be used. And so if you're at that landscape tool level and you draw a circle and want to really parse out and it's too small, we're going to tell you we're not able to deliver information. And that's an important piece because we don't want people to have a false sense of precision when they're looking at this. In terms of how we're going to look to identify some of these improvements in the future, remote incorporation of remote sensing is 100% a goal, and we are turning to the Forest Service as how an FIA is how they incorporate this. So that is for sure on the list of a continuous improvement that we're going to be working with.
I'll also add that for those that are very interested in how you might do that with plot-based estimates, there's a publication, Bechtold and Patterson 2005, that can teach you how to take what's called a condition status, which is like the forest condition in a plot, and try to use that to estimate like a larger spatial area based off of that. But it is just a plot-based estimate. So just additional information there. But we have another question related to the flexibility of the tool and maybe parameters in some of the tools. So, for example, like let's take like harvested wood product half-lives. The IPCC maybe has default estimates on their own that might differ from the US estimates. Do you have the ability to input your own parameters for some of the estimates within the tool?
Great question. So the answer is that yes, there will be some flexibility in that. So, for example, if you are looking at we have default factors for going from a log to a primary product, but you'll have the ability to override that using your own factors that you like. In terms of like the half-lives of the different products, the answer is that there will be the flexibility to change it, but not necessarily for every user. it's sort of a back end thing that we are looking at. And the one thing that I do want to emphasize though is that as there are updated parameters and updated methodology changes from the actual official platform, we will have different versions. So you will have the ability to select, the version 1 versus the version 2 versus the version 3. We won't, that will be starting now. So we won't have the ability, for example, if there's a parameter that's from the IPCC version 4, and we're using what's currently available, IPCC version 6. We're not going to go back and say you can use that one, but starting forward, we're going to have those versions.
With the carbon inventory tool, do users have the ability to choose kind of what carbon stocks to estimate? So I guess on top of that as well, is the estimate coming from things like the growing stock, or does it also include soil carbon or other carbon pools?
Yeah, great question. So we do report all of the carbon pools, but we are being very cognizant about making sure folks understand the level of detail and the level of measurements that's associated with each of those tools. So within the FIA plots, and there are specific pools that are measured, and they're measured at different points in time. And then from those pools, there are some that have kind of the direct measurements associated with them, above ground to below ground. And then there's some plots that are modeled. And so we report all of them, but we separate by what is measured and what is modeled. So folks kind of get a sense of what the uncertainty is.
Could you also describe a bit more about the makeup and background of the methodology experts?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of the experts that are involved were authors on the entity level guideline forestry chapters. So we have a combination of the folks that are working within the Forest Service, whether they're part of the forest side, the FIA program, or part of the Forest Products Lab. And then we have academics that also have specific expertise in specific tools, whether or not they are life cycle assessment experts, consultants who are experts in life cycle assessments, or whether they're on the forest side. And we have specific subcontractors that are developing these tools, and they also have specific expertise in the individual tools.
Are there any plans to parse the landscape level forest inventory tool into land use change components? And then on top of that, a bit of a comment is the USDA Forest Service Learn tool, LEARN tool, is a potential alternative, though currently it doesn't seem to be capable of handling sourcing areas much larger than a single county.
Yeah, this is a great suggestion. So the regional tool right now is looking at remaining forests, but there's not a whole lot of it's on the list to look at the land use change piece and be able to include that in there as well.
On the chat on the regional kind of versus national, on the product side, our data will represent where the LCA or EPD parameters for the geographic area. So some EPDs are national, some are regional, some I think are even maybe state or even more localized. So where we got that data, whatever the parameter is on the product side, is how it will be represented in the platform.
So we have two questions that are a little bit related. So first one being, can you confirm that the carbon inventory approach is a modeled estimate? And then along with that does the tool report uncertainties associated with that estimate as well?
Okay, let's see here. So whether it's a model or model assisted inventory approach. So the data is coming from FIA. So we are taking the plot measurements, and we are applying essentially a smooth out function to represent the fact that across a specific forest type in a specific area, you may have different plot numbers that kind of give kind of wonky results if you're pulling together, for example, all the FIA plots that are in specific age classes to kind of develop a growth curve. So there is a modeled component to sort of smooth that curve, but it's all based on FIA plots. And then what was the second question was about uncertainty? Was that?
Yeah, does the tool report uncertainties associated with the estimates?
Yeah, so we are wrestling with this right now. We very much want to be able to communicate the uncertainty associated with this. It becomes confounded when you're dealing with 2 points in time and you're also dealing with many different pools, each with their own difference in uncertainty. So you might have a difference in uncertainty that's different with the measured pools than you do with the modeled pools. But that is an active area of communication that we would love your feedback on, to be able to communicate this properly.
Just a comment as well that a potential another end user for the platform could be local and state governments, especially as like various municipal or state level entities are interested in doing climate planning. The provided example is from Minnesota and trying to use tools to make some rough estimates about potential climate mitigation benefits of like a practice like avoided conversion or other types of tree planting. So just another, if you want to add another thing to your slide of a user group there.
I thank you to whoever brought that up, but that is a very, very important use. The default tool, our basic scenarios, are exactly meant for that. Is to really to provide these course estimates at a large scale that can be used for the Forest Service. The Forest Service, national forests are using these tools. States can use these tools. Lots of folks can use these tools. So yeah, just definitely a great use. NRCS can use these tools, and we're hoping that they do.
What type of data would a landowner need to enter into the tool to estimate like their carbon stocks or potential annual carbon sequestration rates?
Yeah, great question. So it depends on how much data you have. So if you have your own data that is really associated with stand level volume data, that you can use our custom tool, and that will provide essentially the conversion to the carbon. And then if you enter the data at 2 points in time, then that will give you your carbon change. If you don't have that information and you really just have like your forest type, where you're located, because that will give a sense of what the FIA data that it will be pulling from, and maybe like the age of your stand, then you can use the default tool, and that will give you an estimate of stock, estimate of an annual sequestration, and then can also do some basic projections depending on different scenarios.
Another methodology question, but do the tools use the more recently released national scale volume and biomass equations?
Yeah, it's using the FIA data. So the FIA data is now migrated to that. So yes, it's using that.
All right, actually, I think we got through all of our questions, unless any other questions want to roll into the chat. I'll give it a moment. I'll like leave it open if anybody else has any questions or comments. But again, thank you, Edie and Jane. This is very informative. I think most people on this call at this point understand the need for increased data transparency and access. Because even as somebody that works at a university, finding readily usable data at times can still be difficult. So seeing something like this makes me very excited, trying to remove barriers to people being able to access new types of information and data.
Thanks for having us, Chad. And just again, another offer, when this platform goes live, it'll be really fun to show it. It's one thing to talk about it, but to actually show the functionalities, I think will really bring things to life. So if folks are interested in having us give a presentation where we're demoing the platform, we're happy to do it.
All right, thank you. And I just put up on the screen again just the our final remaining webinar coming up on May 6th. You can register for that webinar using the bottom QR code there. You can also join our listserv using the top QR code. But I would like to again thank our guests and for their presentation, and thank everybody for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day.